Okay, guys, it's time to look at the non-wage impacts of unions on the public service. So we spent some time discussing the wage impacts, how important those are. But the reality is that in the public sector, the non-wage impacts are in many ways significantly more important, both at a theoretical level and a practical level. Now, the text goes through some of this stuff in detail, and I'm really interested in the first couple of parts here, the merit system issue and the specific functions. I'm not so much concerned from exam purposes with the personnel processes because they're fairly limited. Um, the effects are very limited in that area, and you can take a look at that, and that should come up in the HR class fairly specifically, actually. So the first theoretical issue is the impact on the merit system. As you know, if you've had public personnel management, hiring in the public service is at almost at the 90% level across different levels of different levels of government is based on merit. That is, a success in the competitive examination and an interview process. In other words, you don't hire your cousin's mentally retarded ex-wife, that sort of stuff. Or you don't hire based on political patronage. Merit is the great principle introduced in with the Pendleton Act in the 1880s and expanded across all levels of government, or almost all levels of government, up to and including the 78 Civil Service Reform Law. So it's a very important component that hiring and promotion be based on merit. Now, you're all, or most of you, have some experience in the public sector, and you know, and you have come across and seen violations of merit system hiring principles. But by and large, it's not that it will ever, patronage or corruption will ever be eliminated. What has happened is that it's significantly reduced. You're not able to hire dubious characters in large numbers anymore. There will always be some, but the problem is, as the public service becomes more complicated, as you've moved away from direct provision of services, from labour types of jobs and so forth, to move into intellectually stimulating and demanding work, and work that demands some experience, you can't afford, if you're a politician, you can't afford to hire an idiot. Now, in some cases you don't have much choice, and that is an issue. However, the union thing on the basis of promotion and access to promotion tends to be based on seniority. The most senior qualified person should get the job. And so you have this constant fight between the people who argue for the person should be promoted based on the merit, that the best qualified for the particular job, and the union who will typically argue that the most qualified for the best qualified person for the job is typically the person with the most job experience or in-work experience. So at one level, it's kind of an interesting argument. Yes, you can theoretically say that obviously the best person for the job should get the job. Then you raise the question, well, how exactly do you determine that? And the first thing that will come up, of course, will be that, what experience does that person have? And in general, people will say the person that has more or greater levels of experience will probably be the most qualified. So you can see that there's a theoretical argument usually used against unions per se, not against the principle that unions are advancing, but you used to attack that unions are feather bedding, they're trying to promote mediocrity or sustain mediocrity and so forth. And the practical reality on the other side is the extraordinary difficulty of assessing who the best character for a particular job is, and the actual, in the real world, the actual importance of seniority, or they don't call it seniority, but practical experience at a particular level in a job. So that's a very, very big issue. And what you have are mechanisms that try to accommodate collective bargaining to merit systems. And it's not just in the promotional thing, it's who gets access to training, who gets sent on to a variety of training functions, educational processes and so forth. How are those sorts of things determined? And that's a constant issue for the union and for management. At the practical level, it tends not to be quite as big an issue as it is seen as at the theoretical level. For the most part, and in a sense this is what would you call it, sort of in-house nature of management in the public service in comparison with the private sector. Most of the managers in the public sector came through the process. If you want to be a police captain, you better have been a police lieutenant, and you better have been a sergeant and a corporal or an officer, or whatever it happens to be. So you have an understanding of how the process works. private sector, that's not the case at all. You're going to come from very, very different, or for the most part, from very different backgrounds. So this incestuous thing about public sector management coming from the ranks leads to an accommodation, a recognition of how the system works. And in a sense, the good things are that, of course, that it provides continuity, it provides an incentive system for employees, it provides a track for promotion and advancement. On the other hand, it's this sort of inbreeding, this lack of willingness to expose yourself to other ways of doing things, this hidebound, rule-bound way of making promotions or making sure that certain sorts of people get promoted that causes problems. Now you'll see it very, very directly in areas of race, where people that are at the top are by and large Anglo-Saxons and male. And how do you get in? How do you get promoted? It has been a consistent issue because people tend to promote people that look like them or to support people who look like them. So it is a constant issue. And from the collective bargaining point of view, however, unions try to at least maintain what's called a LIFO system, last in, first out. So that's the last person hires the first person that's laid off, a LIFO system. So that's a union security issue. You want to protect your employee base. Now, at a practical level, the last person in is the least experienced person. So it makes sense from a management point of view and from a union point of view. But if you look at it from the point of view of somebody that's opposed to public employee unions, it makes no sense at all. Management should have the absolute right to determine who goes, and management should be able to fire people that they find that are ineffective. So that's one of the big issues. So the union security issue, the seniority issue, and then take a look at what it says about affirmative action and diversity and so forth. How do you hire for diversity? And what is the legal status of that issue today? As you know, it's extraordinarily controversial. It doesn't seem to be a way to resolve it that accommodates the interests of the contending parties in it and so forth. So it's something that's not going to go away in the United States. And the last issue on this he talks about is new public management, how you actually try to manage for these sorts of things. So that's the internal issue and the theoretical issue. And it's actually not just theoretical, it's practical. The other side of it are the specific impacts and on management rights. And if you look at the text, it talks about the scope of bargaining. What's bargainable in the public service? In the private sector, it's wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment. And the public service is very different. Teachers bargain over class size. That is essentially affects the mission of the school district. If you bargain that class sizes should be 20 and the management wants to have 40, then what you're doing is doubling the cost of teachers. That's a huge, huge deal. If you're a police officer, in the old days it used to be 2-person patrol cars, and now it's 1. Well, you've doubled the risk to an individual police officer. Actually, you probably more than double the risk to an individual police officer. But you have spread the available resources to provide services to the community. So that sort of impact on the process. And so it's these issues that I'm interested in. This and the effect on the budget process itself. Union negotiations have to be sort of tied in with the budget process itself. You have to try and figure out where you're going. The budget is an open process, so you have to sort of figure out how much you're going to budget for raises. Well, if you let everybody know how much you're budgeting for raises, the union knows how much money that you have to put into that area. So it becomes a bit of a problematic area. But take a look at this stuff, and as I say, I'm concentrating on the impacts on the merit system and on some of the specific impacts on personnel policies. Okay, guys.